Today is Transfiguration Sunday. And although Transfiguration Sunday might not be a common observance in many faith traditions, there are those who do attempt to pay attention to the significant moment in the life and the ministry of Jesus, but many don't. But today we're going to conclude our series, Follow Me. And so let's take a look at this moment and consider this event. As we read in the book of Mark, and as many of us know, the Gospel of Mark is kind of an abbreviated account of Jesus' ministry. It goes quickly from one event to another. There's this other thing that sets this Gospel apart from the others, and that is what some scholars call the messianic secret. Because in Mark, Jesus silences demons who recognize who he is. He tells those he heals not to mention it to anyone. And Jesus also warns his disciples not to tell anyone that he's the Messiah or the Son of God. Because in Mark, Jesus' true identity is revealed on the cross. So we get to this part of the account. We know that it was about 6 days since Jesus had a discussion with his disciples about his coming death and resurrection. And so here we find Jesus taking Peter and James and John up the mountain. Remember that last week we learned that James and John were among the very first disciples that were called by Jesus, and they had walked with him and followed him from the very beginning. But then all of a sudden he changed in front of them, it says. Transfigured, it's the word that we have become used to reading here. And we even call it the Feast of Transfiguration. But that word sounds pretty holy. Or it sounds really religious or even theological. And it's simply the word change. But the Greek word here is the same word that we get the word metamorphosis or change. Many of you know, and may not know, that I'm kind of a science nerd and I love to look and collect rocks. I especially like metamorphic rocks. They change from one thing to another through pressure and heat. But maybe when you hear the word metamorphic or metamorphosis, you think of butterfly. Here, the word metamorphosis is the process of changing from a caterpillar to a beautiful butterfly. But here's the question. Which is the true form of this creature? Is it the caterpillar or is it the butterfly that is the true form? Is it both? Maybe it's a matter of how and when you look at it. What happened on that mountain was not so much a change into something different, but a revealing of the essence of the one who was changed. Jesus revealed who he was on the mountain. The metamorphosis was beautiful as we read that he was transformed in front of them. His clothes became dazzling, extremely white. But it's much more than that. What I believe that Mark is telling us is that the Jesus that walked up the mountainside with them and the Jesus that was transfigured before them was the same Jesus. He is always who he is. He is always present in the fullness of his being. Jesus became who he was on that mountain, even though he was who he was as he climbed up and then down again. He is always who he is. And we could only see a part of him, the part that we need at any given time and any given moment. We experience only a piece, a dimension of the reality that is Christ. And we get used to that. It starts becoming familiar to us. And the word that came at Jesus' baptism also resounds at his transfiguration. In the beginning of Mark, a voice comes down from heaven to tell Jesus, "You are my beloved Son. I take delight in you." Now at this beautiful display of God's glory, we hear a voice coming from the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." And this is the invitation to get to know God and Jesus deeper and deeper. So just as Jesus revealed himself to those three disciples and they were able to see him in the magnitude of his love, he desires to take us from one revelation to another revelation of who he is. You see, we can listen to him, we can follow him, be more like him as we choose to open ourselves up to who he is and the magnitude of his love here and now. Jesus invites us to have a mountaintop experience with him. And I've had many mountaintop experiences, both physical and spiritual. One year I went to Aspen for a men's retreat, and we stayed high up on the mountains of that beautiful town. One day we were able to visit caves to see all sorts of beautiful formations of stalactites that were close to Glenwood Springs. And then we drove up the mountain there in Aspen. We got all the way to close to 13,000 feet, and it was a beautiful sight. I teared up a little bit as I reflected on the greatness of God and just the opportunity to see the splendor of his creation. It was a day I'll never forget. But most of the week, though, we stayed at the foot of the mountains in full view of the snow-topped mountain range. And I found myself every afternoon sitting and just meditating on the mountains, remembering what it was like to be on top of them and giving thanks for their beauty and their imposing grandeur. And this is what mountaintop experiences are. Those moments that take us to experience another dimension of God's love and God's grace and God's mercy. It's those moments when we catch a glimpse of something larger, something deeper, something more profound. Those moments when we hear a word that reverberates in our soul for weeks, if not a whole lifetime. It's those moments when a tear comes to our eye as we stand on the precipice of glory. It's those moments when a lump comes to our throat as we encounter the depths of love and sacrifice. It's those moments when we climb a mountain and we see what it is that we are following. It's those moments when we move a little closer, grow a little taller, and move a little closer and listen a little better. And just like those disciples that day, we have a mountaintop experience and we come back down with Jesus at our side. Life is a continual going up and coming down in our religious experiences. And we draw inspiration from those brief moments when we have been on the mountain, meditating on the scripture or hymns that remind us of our mountaintop experiences, bringing images back to us from our spiritual mountaintops, and keeping them in places that call to mind our moments on that mountain. Sometimes it's telling the stories from our mountaintops with others, or sharing the insights that we learned and intentionally seeking out stories from others about their time on the mountain. Psalms 121 says this: I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will not slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep you going out and you're coming in from this time on and forevermore. This is why we read our Bible. This is why we gather together or sing hymns or help our brothers and sisters. It is because as we change and grow through our discipleship path, we recognize that it's only possible because of him. Only Jesus.